Arrival at Hollow Glen. In the heart of Hollow Glen, a small, isolated village, surrounded by dark, whispering woods, there stood an ancient tree known as the Wishing Tree. The tree's gnarled branches stretched toward the sky like skeletal hands, and its bark bore deep scars as if clawed by creatures long gone. Villagers spoke of its power with hushed reverence. It was said to grant wishes, but always at a price. One moonless night, a wanderer named Elise arrived in Hollow Glen. She was drawn to the village by whispers of the tree's legend. Her life had been riddled with tragedy, and she sought a remedy for her pain. As she approached the village inn, the innkeeper, a grizzled man with hollow eyes, warned her about the Wishing Tree. "Be careful what you wish for," he said, his voice trembling. "The tree gives, but it takes more." Ignoring his warning, Elise pressed for details. The innkeeper reluctantly revealed that to make a wish, one had to tie a ribbon to the tree's branches under the light of the new moon. But every wish came with a consequence, a sacrifice. The crimson ribbon. That night, Elise ventured into the woods, clutching a crimson ribbon. The forest was alive with eerie sounds, the rustle of unseen creatures, the hoot of an owl, and the faint, mournful wail of the wind. The deeper she went, the thicker the mist became, curling around her ankles like ghostly fingers. When she reached the Wishing Tree, she hesitated. Its presence was oppressive, and the air around it felt unnaturally cold. The tree seemed to hum with anticipation, its branches swaying despite the stillness of the night. She tied the ribbon to a low-hanging branch and whispered her wish. "I wish for a life free of pain and sorrow." The wind howled, and the tree's branches swayed violently, as if acknowledging her plea. For a brief moment, the crimson ribbon seemed to glow, its light swallowed quickly by the tree's dark bark. The next morning, Elise woke in the inn to find the air lighter, her heart unburdened. Her memories of tragedy were gone, replaced by a blissful calm. But the villagers looked at her with a mix of pity and fear. As she walked through the village, she noticed something unsettling. Everyone she passed avoided her gaze, their faces pale and drawn. Whispers in the shadows, days turned to weeks, and Elise reveled in her newfound peace. The weight she had carried for so long was gone, but a gnawing unease began to creep into her mind. Shadows moved independently of their sources, stretching and curling unnaturally. Sometimes, they seemed to reach for her. At night, whispers filled the air, faint and unintelligible, like voices carried on a phantom wind. One evening, Elise decided to visit the tree again, hoping to find reassurance. She discovered that the scar on its bark now bore her name, carved deep in oozing dark, sticky sap that smelled of decay. She recoiled, but as she turned to leave, a sudden rustling made her freeze. She could feel eyes watching her from the darkness between the trees. That night, she awoke to a sharp knock on her door. A child's voice called out, "Help me, Elise." Heart pounding, she opened the door to find no one there. As she stepped outside, she saw the shadows of villagers standing motionless at the edge of the forest, their eyes glowing faintly. They whispered in unison, their voices blending into a chilling chant. The price must be paid. The tree's revelation panicking, Elise ran to the Wishing Tree, desperate for answers. The forest seemed alive around her, the trees groaning and creaking as if whispering secrets. The ground beneath the Wishing Tree pulsed faintly, as though it had a heartbeat. The tree's branches writhed like living things as she approached. A voice, deep and resonant, emanated from the tree itself, shaking the air. "You wished for freedom from pain and sorrow," it said. "In return, I took your suffering. But suffering cannot simply vanish, it must be borne. The villagers now carry your burden." Horrified, Elise begged the tree to undo her wish. The tree's laughter was a low, guttural rumble. "To undo a wish, a greater sacrifice is required," it said. "Your life, freely given, will set them free." The final sacrifice, tears streaming down her face. Elise considered her choices. The villagers' whispered chant grew louder, and their glowing eyes filled with sorrow. Their faces, pale and gaunt, seemed to plead silently with her. With trembling hands, she tied another ribbon to the tree, this one black, her fingers shaking as she made the knot. "I give my life," she whispered, her voice breaking. The tree's branches coiled around her like a cocoon, pulling her into its gnarled trunk. Her screams were muffled as the bark closed around her, sealing her within. The villagers gasped as the glowing in their eyes faded, their faces softening. Some fell to their knees, clutching their chests as if a great weight had been lifted. The tree stood silent and still, its bark smooth and unscarred once more. The black ribbons swayed gently in the wind, the only sign of Elise's sacrifice. A quiet ending. The villagers returned to their lives, their memories of Elise and the burden she had lifted fading like a forgotten dream. The air in Hollow Glen grew lighter, but an unspoken rule settled over the village. No one ventured near the wishing tree, but the wishing tree remained, its gnarled branches reaching skyward, waiting for the next soul, desperate enough to seek its help. Its bark bore no scars, but the ribbons of those who came before hung from its limbs, fluttering in the breeze like ghosts of forgotten wishes. Thanks for watching, and subscribe my channel.